This episode is part of Sure Sounds Good. We're supported by Shure mics and headphones, with production by Made in India. So if you think we sound good, well, now you know why. We're using the Shure MV7 and MV7X mics. It's their latest mics for podcasters. It's a studio-level recording mic that I can use at home or in the studio. It's simple. Just connect via USB or XLR. This makes podcast recordings so much easier, no matter where you are. Curious to know what equipment we were using? Well, just check out the show description for more information or type shure.com on your browser. When it matters the most, rely on Shure to deliver premium sound wherever you go.
Pops in a pod. Pops in a pod. Pops in a pod.
You know, Nadir, it's really cool that after 3 years, we're actually recording in a studio. I can't believe this. This is a pinch me moment, literally.
No, absolutely. And recording the podcast in the studio, I think, has a very, very different feel to it, considering the fact that we've been doing at home and we've been doing it off whatever video conferencing.
Yeah, the evolution of the podcast has been crazy. But you know what? One thing I'm really excited about is we're recording in a studio. But the second is our guest. And I'm just going to call you the powerful couple. Nadir, why don't you introduce one of our guests?
Well, he is a self-proclaimed accidental entrepreneur turned full-time content creator and podcaster, and recently turned an author.
And she's also an entrepreneur and a startup advisor. Now, here's the thing that I realized is if you live in Bombay, you're definitely 6 degrees away connections with them. Because Nadir, you actually went to the same college as our guest.
I did. In fact, Varun is my senior from Syllabus.
What are you saying?
Oh, you didn't know that.
Welcome, Varun and Pooja, to Pops in a Pod.
That was like,
This
what?
is going to be fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
This is already starting on a good note.
But it's crazy. And I hope we've done justice to your introductions. But here's the thing, right? With both of you creating so much content, running businesses, and having such public profiles, everything that we could possibly say would just probably someone would have read. So now I want to switch the tables onto you and look at each other when you do this. Is what's one thing, Pooja, about Varun that if you tell us that would totally surprise people?
For the perennial oversharer that I am, what are you going to say?
Varun is extremely shy,
Wow.
extremely self-conscious. Can you believe that?
No, we really didn't see that coming.
Yeah, that's him. And he puts in a lot of work to, just for everybody listening, what you see takes a lot of effort. And he puts in the work. I was just telling him on the way here that, when I see his book and I see everything that people are saying about him, he did it. So yeah, baby, that was all you.
Now it's your turn, Varun.
I'm trying to think of a fun one because you gave a heavy one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Heavy.
going to go with a slightly more fun one here. Pooja is all things K, which is like K-pop, K-dramas, K-movies. The only, there's a point of time in my YouTube, because by accident she started watching it on our television. Suddenly I'm like, why is my YouTube only giving me Korean stuff? Right.
I cannot watch any other content.
Yeah. She only
My
watches
music
Korean
is Korean music. My content is Korean content. It is really good stuff.
But wait, have you made the transition into Korean food also? Those
I mean,
spicy noodles?
I love it. Ramens are things that I'm really... Varun's worried that I'm going to move to Korea and not come back.
I'm like, no, I don't want to go on a holiday to Korea. I might just come back alone. Is the worry here. But yeah, so that's... And also, you should know this, is that she's got deep culture, everything else. So it's it is not okay, I'm just enjoying the content. It's I understand everything. She now, I think, understands the language.
Yeah. I'm learning Korean. My notes is full of words that I can identify. And now I'm sort of stringing them in sentences. So that's, I truly enjoy
And the
it.
reason I haven't caught on is I can't do subtitles. I can't read and watch at the same time. It's a bizarre problem I have. So I couldn't finish Narcos because of that. So I'm that person.
Pooja, because you've mentioned shy, Varun, Simbi, 2007, he had already completed a year and I was just kind of coming in, and we always heard of, I've known him as Duggy throughout, right? because that's how, college sort of addressed him. And there's Rohit Raj, and then there's Varun. And I was like, okay, so these are the rules. And you're constantly hearing about, and you always see Rohit, but Varun's there in the background, just being very suave, just being there. And you're like constantly thinking, kaun hai yaar ye? Matlab. And then you keep hearing their projects together. Rohit had done this one project.
The gangster film.
No, the eggshell save
Oh, yeah,
sex
yeah,
something.
yeah.
And it's still stuck in my head, right? It's
Yeah.
still kind of stuck in my head. And
Stop
that
motion
was
film with an eggshell for
Yeah.
driving safety.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And everyone said that, these two guys are going to do something. For me, I think the Varun Duggirala connection goes way back. And then we've kind of seen your journey and, the way you've grown. And everyone knows you very professionally. And then Pooja obviously comes into the fray, and, you guys have done so well from a professional standpoint. But I think together as a couple, right, when it comes to work, I've heard so many different versions that, oh, I can't work with my spouse because of so-and-so reason. I can really work with my spouse. So at what point did it reach that connection that, okay, you know what, we're going to work together?
I think there's a catalyst that we're leaving out of this. And I must attribute, I think the reason I know this is because I had an early copy of Varun's book, Everything is Out of Syllabus, is Chetan Bhagat played a role in both of you actually meeting for the first time. Who wants to tell us about that?
Do you want to do it?
You go for it. You go for it.
So actually, Chetan Bhagat is when we officially actually interacted for the first time. I don't know if we should tell
You can tell the full story.
the
I
real
think it's
story.
time the world knows the full story.
Varun and I met for the first time, briefly at a time when I had come out of a relationship. Varun, I don't know what his thing was.
I didn't do relationships.
Yeah, so Varun was in that
I would
situation.
just like.
And
I
this
was that
friend
person.
of ours had this Facebook group when Facebook groups were a thing. Okay, this was LinkedIn and Tinder. This was ahead of his time. It was very ahead of his time. And he made me admin of that group saying, listen, you've got to get out. Because I used to sleep at 8:30 every night. I still do. So I'm a very early sleeper, early riser. And my friends were worried that I'm never going to date again. So that's why this group was created. And it was professionals coming together every weekend. And we would all hang out. So single professionals coming together. And I never went. But it was this friend's birthday. And he said, you've got to be there. I landed up there. We met there and we just interacted for 2 seconds because we were both with other people at that party. And then we met at this conference where Chetan Bhagat was speaking. And yeah. So you can continue from there.
So Chetan Bhagat is wearing this pink collar t-shirt, speaking like Chetan Bhagat does. So obviously we were looking around for other things to do. And as that was going on, and so I kept like walking away from where the seating area was and taking the call and coming back. And Pooja was around as well. So we kind of noticed each other. We definitely checked each other out multiple times. And at some point of time, we went up and we had a chat. Some versions are I walked up to you, some versions are
whatever
you
you
walked
want
up to
me.
You will always be wrong in this context.
So at that point in time, Pooja gave me her card and I gave her mine. And so we were discussing, like, because she was at Times of India and Femina and she was leading marketing for them. And we were an agency. So it was all like, okay, maybe we should figure a way to kind of work together, etc. 5 minutes later, I messaged her and asked her out. It's a very like random thing to do. But I was like, sometimes like, let's put business aside on this front, right? Yeah. We eventually did pitch for the business. No, that's a whole different story. And so we started. She didn't catch up with me for a few weeks. I was persistent and eventually we did catch up and then we hit it off.
Yeah, and we were married, what, 3 months later?
3 months later.
Wow.
Yeah.
We met end of April. We were married in August.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
In 3 months.
Yeah. And our courtship was me on a road trip across America on WhatsApp. That was our courtship.
That's a long distance.
I'm just going to take a pause for a second because if Meta is listening to
Yeah.
this.
Oh my God, right. Facebook and WhatsApp. That's right.
This is your campaign right there, man.
Yeah.
3 months.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that time because I just want to figure it out. And I'm going to go back to what Nadir said, right? Where, a lot of times you have your personal life and you have your professional life, right? Nadir has talked in the past how his wife and he have discussed, working together and then realizing that it will not happen. My wife and I, for the longest time, talked about it. Then 2020, and we realized that we can't even stay in the same room and work together. Like running a business is like a whole total different deal. So at what point did your professional and personal lives kind of collide? I know at least, Varun, you said you pitched for the business, but then was that like a discussion or was that like a very seamless thing?
Actually, the start of it was not a discussion. We never really discussed, will we be able to work together, right?
I mean, we always believe that, I think each of us has this idea that work and life can totally be separated. And I feel that if there's not too much overlap, it makes life easier. So for at Glitch, both of us do very different things. So it's not like, oh, we are in each other's face. Like there were many days when we would go to an office that we would only talk on like or catch up on the way to office and on the way back, because we were just doing different things in the organization. So while we would have, let's say, leadership conversations, etc., but we were very clear that we're there to do work, we're there to do a certain set of things. We can easily separate that. The only caveat we gave ourselves before the decision to work together happened is that we shouldn't let that seep over to the house. And I think I give Pooja a lot more credit for that, because I let everything seep over into the house.
I think it's the choices we made. And we were very, very clear. Even though we met in our late 20s, we'd sort of been in a few relationships and, in some very serious relationships. So when we decided to be together, we were very clear that this is going to be a partnership. And we were both extremely ambitious people. There were things that we wanted to do. And if we wanted to succeed, we very quickly realized that we make a good team.
Yeah.
And that helped. It's the choices we made, the decisions we took about that we are going to work together. And there are certain boundaries that we're not going to cross. We actually jotted down our individual ambitions so that we respect that.
Yeah.
And that's what usually happens with couples, where, when you don't clearly talk about what you really want. Like if I want him to say something about me publicly, it's something he will know. If there's something I'm uncomfortable about, he will know, and vice versa. So we're very clear with each other. And I think that is what has helped us. And we knew very early on that we made a good team.
Yeah.
So we just sort of stuck to it.
It's very interesting what you say about communication, because I think this is something that my wife and I also constantly talk about, right? That the whole aspect of growth in your marriage also, that's why they keep saying you have to work at it, and it's not something that
Absolutely.
just keeps going, right? And you spoke about the fact that you have a certain list, and at some point, we need to understand that boundary, whether it's personal or professional. But from a professional standpoint, if you can give certain examples that, okay, boundaries have been crossed, take a step back and let's kind of reevaluate that situation. How often do you think this happens in your professional working environment?
Not as much, though.
Yeah, I think for us, that, I think probably happened as we started to scale, because when we were small, we didn't have time to think about that. But as we scaled and there were more people that came into the dynamic, and, then there's certain situations where silly things like, okay, is he going to be available, or is she going to be available to do this?
Yeah.
But you know what? I need him to take care of a personal errand. And it's at those times where we were very objective, and I do give us a lot of credit for it, that, say for example, it is with Leia, when Leia was born, and I was the CEO of the company, we were in the middle of an acquisition. There was no way I could be away, even though, say for example, I wanted to be. We worked that out. Varun got ready to leave for work, sort of 10, 12 days
I think,
after
the first
Leia
couple of
was
weeks,
born. I had a panic attack. It's like, why am I the one who's sitting, and why do I have to sit back? And, things like that actually sort of came up. It was when after Leia was born, and we both wanted to be out there, but one of us had to sit back. And then we made that decision that it won't just be me, it will be both of us. I actually went back to work 12 days after having Leia, more so because I wanted to, but we found great balance that I could also be at home, take care of my body, which really, I needed that after childbirth, right? And we supported each other. But we did that when other people come into the dynamic. That's when
And we also don't sleep over. Like, we don't let it seep into sleep.
Yeah.
Because finish it off, then go to bed. Like, something happens at work, something happens at home. Just like make sure you talk it out. And I think what we've realized over the years, what really has helped us kind of balance all of these things out, is that we're very honest with each other about what we're feeling, not really keeping it to ourselves. And there is obviously, and even if one of us is keeping it to themselves, it's very obvious to the other thing. I know you're keeping something to yourself. What's going on? Right. And so we do that very often. We're very open about the fact that let's just talk about what you're really going through in your head. Is
and
something bothering you?
Honesty is not just superficial honesty. Things that you will never tell anyone publicly, or someone, if you say this to somebody, even your best friend's going to judge you. If you get to that stage where you can truly be yourself with each other, that's what's worked for us. even in very, very difficult situations. And we worked very hard to make that happen.
Yeah.
It didn't happen naturally.
It's interesting you say that because we recently, my wife and I had this discussion, which is that there are certain things that you don't say in front of friends and family. And in my head, I'm like, but it's not wrong. I'm not saying anything wrong. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I feel wrong about it. The
I've been
fact-
where you are.
I think every guy can put their hand up and admit
And-
they've been there, right?
So, I mean, I completely understand when Pooja was saying that, okay, there are certain things you do, there are certain things that you don't. And I think every wife will connect with what Pooja is saying because this very recently happened and my wife did get upset and I got upset and I was like, but I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't understand, what's happening. And then obviously I went back and there was this serious introspection that I went through and I was like, okay, ultimately we need to be together, right? And if this is something that does not work for her, let's just try and kind of, work it out. So again, Varun, I wanted to ask you, we heard Pooja's perspective on this, but for you, was there a process as such, that, okay, professional and personal boundaries, and what is it that you had to do? I mean, I'm not saying from a sacrifice standpoint, but just certain things that, yes, okay, you know what, she's, meeting me halfway, I will also do certain things to ensure that this works.
I've always believed that you kind of look at your life in a certain set of compartments, right? And that's always been my process, is that what's really important for me to kind of find balance is not just I find time for work and life, which is Pooja and Leia. Also, I get enough time with myself. So as long as I have that and Pooja lets me be that, like she calls me that mad scientist sitting in that corner doing, like fiddling around with random things. And that really helps me get centered. But more than anything else, I don't think I've sacrificed anything, right? Because you go through phases in life where you don't want to be that person who's going partying every night like you were when you were single. And it's not like you can't do that when you're a couple as well. But you progress in life. And I think both of us met each other at the exact moment where we want to progress towards something beyond what we were doing at that point of time. So we're very different as people, but we aligned all our interests into, like, I used to not travel at all. She showed me how much fun traveling can be. Like, I was that person like, who wants to take a holiday? Why waste time? Let's work. I was that person, right? Who's just like, no, we will go on a holiday twice a year, if not once a year. And she made me do that. She made me kind of experiment with places we could kind of go to, etc. All that stuff. I discovered that I like food. I discovered that I like to travel. And in the same way, like, I introduced her to a bunch of stuff, like just the amount of music that we listen to together. It's a phenomenal amount. That's kind of, so we found things we could share with each other. And that I feel is a good progression. Because if you're doing the same thing you were doing in your 20s, when you're in your 30s, and now I'm going to be 40, then what's the fun of it? There's no progression there. So I don't think I sacrificed anything. The only thing I would say I've sacrificed in the last 5 years is sleep. Because
Haven't we all?
so the thing is, Pooja needs her sleep. So the same way how like I need my time to like just do my random stuff, Pooja needs her sleep.
So the thing about us is that there's lots of romance in this relationship, okay? We make sure that there is all of that. But we're very practical people. I mean, there are things that we need as individuals, and there's something that we tell each other. Pooja belongs to Pooja, Varun belongs to Varun, Leia belongs to Leia. Okay? We choose to be together. Right? And that is, we're very clear about that. So if there's something that I want, everyone will rally around making that happen for me. And which is what has sort of, been a practice that I tell all of my friends, even my cousins, who keep asking us, how have you guys been able to sort of do all, like, because we are with each other all the time.
Especially in the last couple of years, right?
Like all the time. And I feel like our relationship became stronger over the last couple of years because every time when you talk about growth, you have to take the romance out of it. You take the expectations of the romance out of it. You take things like sacrifice, compromise out of it. Because why should anybody sacrifice and compromise? That's just honestly outdated.
I think, what happens also, and I've personally been trying to figure this out, right, in the last few months, is a lot of times, like you said, you want to do certain things, but we've been conditioned as kids or growing up that you shouldn't be selfish. And I've had to take a step back and say that, hey, if I want to do a particular thing, or if my wife wants to do a particular thing, or my son, is that being selfish? No, it's just basically because I'm very glad you also brought up the communication aspect, right? Because there's sometimes you have this in your head and you're kind of dabbling with it, struggling with it. But the moment you don't communicate that to your partner, it becomes tough, right?
And also there are things that might inconvenience you, but there is also something fun in that inconvenience. Like, for instance, like I can go back to sleep very easily. That's my thing. Like, I've always been that person who can wake up, go back to sleep easily. So for me, to do nights was the best thing to do because I'm also a person who likes to do stuff. I was a kid who would play with his toys by himself. I wouldn't want to share my toys. I was that kid. Right. I'm like, no, my toy. Like, I would share when people came in, but like, don't spoil it. This is the structure and all that stuff. So with Leia, I remember there were the initial couple of nights, like Pooja would wake up to like a random video on my phone where I'm just playing music and I had the baby and I'm like recording it and we just like walking around the room, right? And for me, that was fun. I made it a fun activity. I made playlists that she would listen to. We have an elderly dog. Should I call him an elderly dog?
Yeah, he's an older dog.
It's an older
Chipu.
dog. Trips now, 10? He's the oldest person in the house. So he can't go the entire night without having to go take a leak. So at some point in time, he'll wake me up in the night to let him go do that. So I go clean up and all that stuff. For me, that's like, this guy is going to be around only for some amount of time. I get that moment with him. That's his and my thing in the night, that he'll wake me up at about 4 or 5. Thankfully, no longer 3 a.m., but like 5, 6 a.m. And then he wants a biscuit at 6:15, 6:30. So he'll again scratch me saying, I want a biscuit. And both the dogs kind of jump on it. So for me, that's my morning. My morning is the fact that these two will wake me up. I'll go get a biscuit. Then they'll pee again and do the other business. And there's an enjoyment to that. And I feel that those moments it's those tiny ones that really matter. Yeah. And I enjoy that. Like even if I'm like really like hungover, they'll wake me up, I'll go do that and come back and go to sleep. It's actually happened about a week ago.
Yeah, and last night, Varun.
I don't think I woke up with a biscuit today though. So that's
But I want to dial back because actually this is something, again, I'm referring back to your book, where I discovered that actually your parents were 20 and 24 respectively when you were born.
Yeah.
And
they were 16 and 20 when they got married.
Wow. Let's put that into context. Right?
Yeah. No, also like it wasn't an arranged marriage. They were dating, parents found out and said, oh, let's get them married. So it's just one of those things that happened. But so I grew up with two people who were growing up. And I think that also kind of helps you kind of develop into the kind of person that you are. Yeah.
And that's one of the things. And I'm also going to involve you in this conversation, Pooja, because one thing we've realized over the 100-odd episodes that we've done with parents all across the world is the parenting style that you were exposed to growing up has a direct impact in what you are like as a parent. So let's actually switch this conversation to Pooja, because I'm very curious to know, does Varun's parenting style reflect that he was kind of brought up by younger parents, or how did that kind of play out for you all?
I say this very respectfully, but I feel that parenting has changed. We both have wonderful parents. So, and we respect what they have done. But our parenting style is very different from theirs. Also because times have changed. Yeah. So is it reflective of the kind of stuff of how he was brought up? Things like influence of music or influence of art and culture. That's strongly there. But the way he is as a father, very different from...
I think also, we're also like very unique in that. Even when we got married, right? You normally have like parents have a say in how you get married. And both of us like, you guys are guests.
Yeah.
You are coming here.
Yeah.
We are self-funding this wedding and you guys are just attending. You get to have a say in X number of people who attend this wedding from family. We are doing this our way, right? And so we've always been that kind of a couple where we're this like, for the outer world, including family, we are like a unit. Like we take these calls together. And so they have to deal with two sides. And oftentimes, I don't think it's about good cop, bad cop, but we flip roles. We play different roles when it's required. But we've always been very independent in terms of our thought. So like what you said, like for my parents, I grew up with a lot of music, a lot of books around. Pooja as well, her mom's brought her up with some really like strong set of values and how to kind of really look at the world. We brought that to our parenting style. But our style of parenting is so different from our parents. I can see the expression in all their eyes saying, do we say something? They won't listen to us anyway. Why are we bothering? Right? I can see that entire conversation
over
happened.
Over 4.5 years that it's changed, right? Because in the start, they were all very involved. Yeah. And then we had to tell them that, guys, step back. Because you guys had parents 30 years ago, right? It's very different now and we want to do it our way.
And that's a struggle, right? If you think about it.
It is a struggle. But thankfully, both our mums got it very easily without any drama.
And my dad was sitting at the back saying,
whatever.
I'm not bothering. I'm like, let you guys do what you're doing. Like.
No, I think it's very different, especially when you are living in a joint family, right? So I live with my parents. So I think there's a constant eye on being judgmental.
Yes.
And at the same time, there's a constant eye on I'll show you how to do it better.
Sort of
right?
rebelling. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay. And so I completely get that, right? Like you need to, okay, back off. Let us kind of do it our way. And I think in today's day and age, especially I'm just talking metro parents, right? Both husband and wife are working and, you want to give the best to your child and you want to ensure that everything that is required to ensure good bringing up, right, is sort of there. Now, I want to kind of take a step back over here because you all were so involved in the business and, growing the agency and everything. At what point did you decide that, okay, I think we've done really well so far. Let's shift the focus to starting a family, right? What was that journey like?
It was never that.
Oh,
We were in the middle of being courted by, all these wonderful networks. And we said, let's have a baby. It was.
I'm going to correct this story. There is an addition to this.
It's not a correction, it's an addition.
It's an addition, rather. It's an addition to this. We discussed it many times. We both really wanted to have a kid. I feel I just wanted someone I could play with, equal mental bandwidth could happen. I can buy Legos finally again. I can get back my G.I. Joes. That was going on my head, which my mother gave to Leia. And I felt very sad that my G.I. Joes are now with someone. I don't share my toys. It's a problem. Still don't share my toys. Leia has asked me to share my toys with her. Like my bobbleheads are like, Papa, can I take these two today? I'm like, you can play with them in front of me. I need to know what you're doing with them. But that aside, so I think there was a point in time when we said, okay, we're getting older, we should try and have a kid. And I don't think we saw this is happening on one side, the other side. And we almost, I think we had this one point of time when we said, okay, no, we don't, we still want to travel, we still want to do things. And then
It was
nature
overnight.
takes over.
It was overnight.
Yeah, nature takes over. And then we're like, okay, now, yes, we're doing this.
It was this transition from I will kill you if you get me pregnant to I want a baby tomorrow. Sort of happened overnight.
And you should also know this, is that we are opposites in many ways, but we also flip it around. But Pooja is very impatient as a person.
Very.
I can be supremely patient. You put
Slow, you mean.
Slow.
Not impatient.
Slow. I'm a slow work in progress in general in most things. So that helps in kind of running through this entire chain of things.
So coming back to your question.
Before my digression.
Varun digresses a lot. Is that we never looked at it like that. And we were always very sure that we will be able to handle everything. That's how we operate as people. That we can do anything and everything is possible. How are we going to figure this out when we are about to get acquired? That question didn't even cross our mind.
I think we oftentimes challenge ourselves. How can we make this more complicated?
Yeah, we love chaos.
It's like we're living in one Khatron Ke Khiladi situation.
Yes, that is the
what
thing.
more can we add?
Our friends so often say that you guys are addicted to chaos because we had Leia, we got acquired by WPP.
Pooja was doing up the house. I was actually not very helpful.
I mean, we love it. Our life is never, there is nothing happening. Where there is constantly stuff happening and we really enjoy that. So for us, it was like that. And also, my mother
is the third parent.
Is the third parent. So when we decided or when we were like, okay, I think we should now start having a baby, I went to my mom and said that, will you help me raise her? And she said, I'm giving you the next 15 years of my life. Okay, so we had that. Let's be honest. We had that where my mom said, you do you, boo. And I will handle, when you guys are at work, your kid's going to be with me. And so my mom lives in the same apartment complex in the next wing. So our daughter is with her through the day. So we have that as a support system, which is why we are also so blasé about it.
I think that's the thing about having parental support,
Yes.
right? My dad lives in a completely different country. So I totally understand where you're coming from. But I want to shine light on a completely different aspect. And I didn't realize you all had such a whirlwind courtship and marriage. 3 months. And then, fast forward, you've had your daughter. And one thing Nadir and I keep kind of bringing up is how relationships kind of change between the kid, right? Because, I mean, you talked about how Varun kind of is the night owl, does that. But what's that interpersonal relation kind of changed between having a kid?
Between us?
Yeah.
Let me first explain the fact that we were both in shock after having a kid. We did not know. We were like, oh, we're so cool. We brought up two puppies. We were
We are going to be damn good at it.
Yeah.
But remember, this is public knowledge again. We struggled to have a baby. We've had multiple miscarriages. And so there was this whole process that led up to Leia. So our focus was, let's have a baby. Then the baby came.
We didn't know what to do.
And that's what we were really shocked because our entire life changed.
Has anybody seen The Walking Dead?
Yeah.
I was that zombie in the house.
Yeah,
I was walking around with my life is screwed. I don't know what is going on. Screwed in the sense I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my role was. I was just walking around, and also all the parents were there. And my dad was like, "Can you just snap out of this? You look like you are walking death across this house." Because I'm just walking like a zombie. I was mechanical.
It's like Varun is looking for the manual that the baby got along, but I can't find it. I think all of us went through that.
I'm going to am I going to really it's almost like that. You get a toaster and you don't know the settings and you'll burn
That's
the bread.
exactly how it was. That it's true that women have so much more information out there compared to men. And Varun, you should do something about that, by the way.
These guys are doing that.
That's us.
Exactly.
I didn't want to do the self-brag, but I know exactly what Varun's talking about. I mean, when Nadir and I first started the podcast 3 years ago, it was this very reason. And I keep bringing this up, but I have Nadir to credit for it. If Nadir didn't write his blog, I wouldn't have known half the things that I knew when my son was born. And then we decided that, hey, blogging is 2010. Let's do a podcast about it. And it's through these conversations that we've had with so many dads, we've realized that, there's a lot of information out there. Women are talking about it, but men aren't. And I must appreciate at least you saying that, you were the guy in The Walking Dead, because none of the guys want to talk about it. Everyone wants to be that macho, I cracked it and stuff like that.
Can I also tell you why? I don't think most dads are as involved. I think now they are, but I think a lot of dads, it was not a dad's job to be that involved anyway. Dad would just go back to work, and that was the thing. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but they weren't told to do anything different.
No, and also, what Peter said and whatever you said, Pooja, is the fact that the mums have to be so involved because of biological reasons, right? But nobody understands there are quite a few fathers, and Varun, as you also rightly said, that there's a mindset that yaar baap ko to bhari jana hai kaam karne, right? Uska kya kaam hai? But because of this whole new age parenting that you guys spoke about as well, and I think all of us are living that, nobody wants to understand that what dad's also going through. Nobody wants to put it out there. There's this unnecessary machismo attached to parenting where men just kind of want to keep that embraced. And even if they're going through a very tough time, there was a period, I think, when my daughter was about 3 to 4 months, and there was a point where I broke down. Something just happened and my wife was not taking certain things too well, and it kind of rubbed off me, and I just kind of broke down. And it happened for the first time. I never thought it would happen, and it happened. And we speak about it all the time. And why don't, men come out and speak about it? It's so important, because I think that's how that information needs to flow. And this is exactly why, Peter and I are kind of doing this, encouraging more and more dads to say, just come out and tell your story, right? So that is what I think, what we wanted to check, that post your child, and as you said, you also a walking zombie and everything. It's a very interesting part, because when you look back now, you know the kind of things that you're doing, and if at all you ever feel like having another baby, to take corrective measures.
And also and the interesting is that 3-4 months. I think that 3-4 months is when we had a conversation where she sat me down saying, "Can you just snap out of this thing you're in?" And she was going through a lot herself.
Yeah, I mean, so again, conditioning, right? What your role is supposed to be when you have the baby, and your mind is not able to accept that you're supposed to do that role entirely. And we sat down and had that discussion. Listen, you and I made the baby, right? This is just not on me. And he was like, absolutely, let's sit down and make this. And again, communication. Because I was like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. So what if I'm a mom? That doesn't mean my life is over. And that doesn't mean that, you have to carry the weight of the entire world on your shoulders. We're going to split this equally. And the moment we did that, where we again sat down and wrote down our ambitions that didn't have to change at all. We just revisited them all over again and said, hey, listen, we still want the same things. We just have another person with us. And that helped.
Those few years is where our relationship really evolved. Till then we were, you go through a phase as a couple when you enjoy going out, you're traveling, you're doing all of that stuff. But when you have a kid is when you really become a team, because you have to be a team. If you're not a team, it's just going to be, either you're going to have bitterness or you're going to have distance, you're going to have all that stuff. We were a team. I would never call it shifts because we would swap for each other when the other person needed that time to do something else. But over time, as she grew, and what's been interesting and what's been amazing for us is that I think post Leia being 6 months is when I first really connected with her, because I'm like, I think until 6 months, you're keeping the baby alive. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
Your
absolutely.
job is to make sure
And
this
the
little thing
guys
is alive.
Literally have like a very specific role also, right?
There is no reaction to what you're doing. At 5-6 months is when the baby starts to react, and that's when you really feel stuff. You're like, okay, I want to have fun with this. Also, when I played Magenta Rhythm by DJ Snake every day for a baby to jump in her crib, I have videos of Magenta Rhythm induced child jumping in a crib. But
I have, and I don't know if I've said this before, but the number of times I played like nuclear and bass heavy
Same.
music.
it works. Babies jump all over the place with bass
They
heavy
love
music.
it. They love it.
But I think that's when we really. I think our marriage is at phases. I think the second phase is when we had Leia. I think the third phase is when lockdown started. Is when we actually got.
I think we went from roommates to being teammates, and then it was a real partnership. That's for us. That's kind of the evolution over the last 10 years.
While Nadir and I started this podcast 3 years ago, we had, and we keep saying we had 52 episodes planned. And then our 11th episode, I remember calling up Nadir and saying, hey, there's something called the coronavirus which might hit India. What do we talk about now? Like, this is like completely disrupting our schedule and
parents
program.
at home.
Yeah, parents at home. Like, we actually, our 11th episode, if I'm not mistaken, is actually that. Like, what are we going to do if our kids are at home? We've done multiple episodes on that. Why don't you tell us, like, because technically we're still in the pandemic of sorts?
It was batshit crazy. It was insane. It was insane. I can't believe that we're all alive.
Yeah.
And that all of us were in depression. I'm not saying this lightly. I mean,
I have a question.
seriously.
Did I take Leia with me or into Nature's Basket when it's like post-apocalyptic, or did I go alone?
No, you went
I
alone.
I remember going to a supermarket, right? And I'm like, the tube lights are blinking,
Yeah.
the shelves are half empty, people are in masks. I'm like, I half imagined a guy in a hazmat suit going by. I'm like, this is the apocalypse. Like, we're in the middle of this, right? And from that to now, but what it also did is, you come down to bare things, like at home, because it was Pooja, I, and Pooja's mom and Leia. 4 of us were at home. And that's actually when I think the basics in life is what came to the forefront. And I think when the basics come in front of you, that's when you actually realize that what you really value in your day. In our heads, we got 2 years with Leia full time, which you would not have gotten if you were going to an office, right? We got all that time. We didn't have to, in between meetings, you can just hang with her. That time when Pooja's done a meeting, I've done a meeting where Leia's sitting in the background playing.
Oh, yeah. I think that's very acceptable at this point.
Oh, yeah. So when this whole online school started for us, because she went from play school to nursery during the first phase of the pandemic. And when we were doing online school and then getting into work meetings, that time was really, really hard. But I think parents and children somehow adapted to that schedule, and eventually we all made it work, right? But it was absolutely crazy. But the good was that we did get 2 years with Leia, and she's so sassy. We saw that so often that actually we're grateful.
I'm actually glad you brought up the school, moving from nursery to preschool. And for me, I think the lockdown was the highlight, the whole schooling aspect, because I am the guy who sits next to my daughter while her school is on. Not because pado engineer. It's just very fascinating, right?
I think after a point, fascination wears off.
No, so for me, it is still very fascinating, and I'll explain why. Because I don't look at my daughter as one little kid. She's a human being. She's a tiny person, right? With a lot of opinions. And now, as you were speaking about reaction, right? That for the first 6 months, just keeping the kid alive, and now she's reacting. Now she's 5.5 years old. She's reacting a lot to everything, right? So for me, that education was interesting. And I want to go back to your book because I remember you've written a chapter on how learning is so important and not just your traditional education, page 59, I remember that. It's a Kindle thing. And I was reading and I noticed there was this one line that you mentioned about it's the teacher's job as well. Like you've got to keep the teachers also updated, because as we are in a partnership in a marriage, the school and the parents also are actually a partnership. You can't just outsource schooling and say, "ये भाई अभी तुम्हारा काम है, कर लो जो करना है कर लो, मेरा कुछ काम नहीं है, उसको ना 100 on 100 मिलना चाहिए." Right? You can never do that. And I really like what you wrote, that people just want to acquire knowledge for the heck of it so they can throw it back in conversations. But when it comes to our children, what do you think? Like, learning, yes, I completely believe in learning. But when it comes to education and learning and our kids, because we're all in the same age group, right? Where do you see your child and how do you see education having an impact on your child?
When I said really about sitting in class, like we've sat through classes for almost a year and a half, and it's been a few weeks of her going back. I agree. It's been fascinating to see how the kids, this is all they know, right?
Yeah.
I think for us, it was always about like they're missing out on school, which obviously they're realizing now. But getting back to your question, I think education is about, can you learn the right things that, which will give you something, almost a toolkit for your life. It's not about being an engineer or a doctor. None of us, actually, neither of us are hardcore in terms of our education background. We've done well for ourselves. And we never want to put that pressure on her. We only tell her, just figure out what you want to do, but if you're doing it, just make sure you do it well. And that also comes from the fact that you realize what happens when you try to do too many random things, which is me, and not do any of them well for a long period of time. And that's where she actually learns a lot from Pooja, because Pooja is extremely focused. So we talked to her about how she should be, and thankfully for us, at school, they're teaching them to be better people out in the world. They're not teaching them to study things or mug up as we used to be.
I mean, that's the policy of, I feel, modern education today, at least in most schools, which was so refreshing, that it is not about what you can, especially during examinations, it's not about what you can spit out in 2 hours, right? It's about how are you going to perform in this modern world today? And that is the role of education. It's not about, do you understand the basics of what it takes to survive in the world today and to make the world a better place? The role that you can play, not just as a professional, but as a human being on the planet today. That is amazing, because, Leia, even, she's very clear. She's a vegetarian.
Yeah, and how she's a vegetarian is actually what I think also feeds into the education part.
Right, because when we took this call that we are not going to, for us, because we were never good students in school, for us, we're going to be very honest with Leia about things, right? And we are not vegetarians, by the way. So when we started talking to her about Old MacDonald had a farm, and I'm extremely passionate about, animal welfare, and so when she asked me, are the cows really happy? That was her question. It's not a question I fed into her. Are the cows really happy? And I said, Leia, do you really want to know? And it was a parental moment for me where I had to decide, should I really tell her? And then I decided to actually tell her that no, they're not really happy. No, the chickens are not really happy. No, the goats are not really happy. We eat them. And there's a lot of content, child-safe content available on YouTube today through Dodo Kids or whatever, where you can actually educate them the impact your choices have on animals. So we really went through that phase where we were both doing this together. And she just woke up one day and she said, I don't want to eat any animals. She just said that. This happened a year and a half ago. She's 4.5 today. This happened when she's 3.5. She said, I don't want to eat animals. And she's stuck to it. She keeps telling me, Mama, stop eating fish. Or, you're hurting the fish.
My favorite fish story is we are in Maldives.
Yeah, we were in Maldives.
The chef has this big grill. They have a grill, right, in all the resorts. And there's a grill. And he's very, the chefs always stand next to the grill. They're very look at my spread. She goes up to him and says, you did a bad thing.
Wow. Yeah, no, she said, you made a red choice that, you're hurting the fish. And the chef was taken aback. And all of our friends, all of their kids eat meat, they relish it. But she just, even today, I can't get her. I keep asking, hey, do you want to try this? Do you want to try some prawn or whatever? She says, no, I'm not going to eat it. She says, I'm a proud vegetarian and I would like you guys to be that as well. We're also talking to her about choices that we're making and she's making,
At
and
some
we're all
point,
allowed to have our choices.
when she gets a little older, we'll explain that people eat pepper, but that's, I think, wait for another day.
That's
God.
something I'm really wondering how I'm going to explain to my son.
Yeah, but you'll be surprised to know how well he will take it.
Yeah, because my son has just started eating meat with us and stuff like that. But, since you've said this, and, both of you actually in the last couple of years have spent a lot of time online, right? Working and stuff like that. So Nadir and I kept saying how your office was your office, your house was your house. Then suddenly your house became your office and vice versa, right? I mean, of course, wait, with all due respect, Varun, I know you worked in television production. That also changed a lot back in the day.
Yeah.
But what was it like with your daughter trying to understand that, hey, what do you all do? Or does she realize what you all do at all?
So she's running a business today. She made us buy stuff and she's selling jewelry. So we bought her beads and she's now selling the jewelry. She understands business. She may not understand what it actually means, but she's heard me use the word business strategy. The other day, before the whole bead business started, she told me that I'm going to run a business as well. And I was like, okay, what is your business going to be? She said, I'm going to sell everything in this house. And I said, but doesn't make business sense, because how can you sell everything that I have bought?
Come back home one day to an empty house.
No, but listen to this. I was like, how can you sell everything we have bought? Because we've spent money. Her response to that, you have spent money, not me. So this money comes to me. Isn't that business? I am not kidding. She said that. I was like, this is mind-blowing, Leia. I'm going to help you set something up.
This is the next level of kids learning capitalism. We just had this chat the other day, right? With money.
But we should be doing like another episode maybe 2 years later and see.
What did she sell? But no, she's also smart enough to know who to sell to. Rohit and Rakshita live upstairs.
They're also godparents to Leia.
And so we were over at their house and there were a bunch of other friends over. I think this is at the point, and obviously when we finally decided, let's few of us catch up together. Cases are down, let's do that. Leia's like, opportunity. So goes with she spends the day making those bead bracelets, sells it to all of them, and then eventually takes the bead bracelets back, but keeps the cash because she wants to sell them again. And I'm like, once again, you took the cash, you made them enjoy. So you basically rented a bracelet for half an hour, but made like $50-$100 from each of them. So I'm like, yeah, you're going to do fine, kid.
You know what? I've just realized we can do this for another couple of hours. And this is the best part about being parents, and especially around the same age. But I'm going to end with this question. And I think since both of you have done so many podcast episodes, I mean, Varun, do you even have a track of how many episodes you've been a guest on?
I think I would have guessed on easily like 30 plus easily.
Okay. So now to make this interesting and something that you won't forget, what's one thing or one question you've always wanted to be asked on a podcast but have never been asked?
I've never been asked about music.
This is
It's
perfect.
actually the thing which I'm very hardcore about my music choices and the amount of music I listen and the way. Like Pooja will walk in one day to me listening to AP Dhillon.
Yeah.
The other day it'll be a song from Pushpa. The third day it'll be like George Harrison.
Varun could have a whole career in music, and I don't know why he doesn't do it. You should just have a podcast about music, by the way.
How many will I have a free podcast? I thought about it.
Yeah. So that's the opportunity. Whoever is listening, you know what? Next time you want to get Varun and have a great conversation, it's about music. What about you, Pooja?
I could speak for hours about Korean stuff. Everything to do with Korea. The content, the culture, the music, all of it. I could spend days maybe talking about it, and I would love to do that.
Yeah. And I'm hoping South Korea.
South Korea, yeah. yes.
Otherwise, it will take a very
South
different turn. Suddenly,
This just went dark.
helicopters in the studio.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
But I remember a story that 2020, just before the lockdown, we were supposed to go to South Korea, the wife and I and the kid, and we had to kind of cancel it because it was a major heartburn for me. And I was like, what? Now my wife's like, I just don't want to go there. It's associated with cancellation. So I don't want to do it. It's like, fine, I'll go alone. It's like, yeah, just, take the daughter and go. I'm perfectly okay with that.
Well,
So, yeah.
I have to
give her
find
the
a group
ticket.
of people to travel with.
No, I'll come along.
Yeah, you will, right?
and you already have an in-house entrepreneur who's going to help you sell
Yeah.
stuff on the way.
One
I'm
back
just
look-
worried this is the next BTS video will have Pooja and Leia. in the background.
Oh my God, if someone can get me to meet with BTS.
I actually got her like I have this thing with bobbleheads where I buy those Funko bobbleheads.
Yeah,
I actually found her a bobblehead of Jimmy?
RM.
RM.
Yes.
Sorry,
RM
close
is my
enough.
favorite.
Close enough.
No, it's not close enough. All right.
I remember the names. RM also I know.
yeah.
But she said it doesn't look like him, so I'm like, fine.
Yeah. Anyways. But guys, thanks so much. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. We really appreciate it for you, both of you, to just share so much because, honestly, like I said, right, parenting is hard. And the fact that like both of you were open and shared your stories with us, thanks so much for spending time.
Thank
This
you
was
for
fun.
having us.
Thank you
This
so
was
much, guys.
fun.
It was really a very open conversation, and we always love that. And you have been great guests. So thank you so much, Varun and Pooja.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, guys.
This episode of Pops in a Pod was brought to you by Sure Sounds Good, using Shure mics and headphones with production by Made in India. Hosted by me, Nadir Kanthawala, and my co-host, Peter Kotikala Puri, with guests Varun Duggirala and Pooja Jauhri. Recorded at Island City Studios by audio engineer Harsh Desai. Edited by Yash Hirave, with producer Hussein Haveliwala.